Welcome to the AC 24/7 Top Story Countdown. We'll guide you through the biggest news of the day. Our focus, advocating our rights, advocating health, and advocating Earth. Here's our pick for number 4.
This 42-year-old judge from South Florida faces enormous scrutiny because of her history with former President Donald Trump. Federal District Judge Aileen has been assigned, at least initially, to oversee the criminal trial against Trump in the Mar-a-Lago documents case.
I think everybody has a fundamental concern of whether she's going to call the balls and strike right down the middle of the plate for both parties, or whether she's going to issue decisions that favor the former president.
The concern stemming not only from the fact that Donald Trump appointed Cannon to the federal bench when he was president, but also from her earlier involvement in the Mar-a-Lago documents probe. Last year, she approved Trump's request to block Justice Department access to the recovered documents until a special master could review them for potential privilege issues. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned her ruling. One concern now, that Cannon will go along with Trump's request to delay the trial.
She only has to take really small steps in order to throw this thing off track for the Justice Department by delaying it until we're past the election. And Trump, of course, hopes that if he manages to get himself elected again, this case goes away, as he would direct his Justice Department to drop it.
But attorney Michael Sherwin, a friend of Cannon's, disputes the notion that she favors Trump.
I still truly believe that she is going to ensure that there is a fair trial, and she is not going to, inject politics into this equation to any degree.
During her confirmation hearing, Cannon thanked members of her family, including her maternal grandparents, who she said had to flee Cuba in 1960, and her mother.
To my loving mother, Mercedes Cuevas, who at the age of 7 had to flee the repressive Castro regime in search of freedom and security. Thank you for teaching me about the blessing that is this country.
There is also concern tonight over Judge Cannon's lack of experience. A Bloomberg database analyzed by the New York Times last month showed she had only taken 4 criminal cases to trial.
She's never tried a white-collar criminal case with all the complications that go with intent and with evidentiary rulings, let alone classified documents.
TheAdvocateChannel.com looks at the world through the lens of equality and inclusion. Subscribe, like, and share now. AC 24/7's Top Story Countdown continues with our producer's pick for number 3.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog's trip to the United States and his address to a joint sessions of Congress on Wednesday is likely the type of trip to the United States that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wishes he was having right now. But instead, it is the Israeli president taking this trip, sitting down with President Biden in the Oval Office, meeting with all the top figures of American politics, including the Vice President, Speaker of the House, and addressing a joint session of Congress. Now, this trip and this speech is ostensibly to mark Israel's 75 years of statehood, and that's why it's the Israeli president going. He is the ceremonial figurehead. He is not technically a part of this Israeli government led by Benjamin Netanyahu. He's not even a part of Benjamin Netanyahu's party. And I think that's significant because tensions in the relationship between this Israeli government led by Netanyahu and President Joe Biden's administration are rather high right now, both about because of the situation in the occupied West Bank, but also because of this massive judicial overhaul plan that Benjamin Netanyahu's government has been trying to push through. And actually, as President Herzog landed in the United States, another massive day of protests were going on here across Israel. Protesters were essentially shutting down many of the train stations, were taking to the streets once again in opposition to this judicial overhaul plan that Benjamin Netanyahu's government has been trying to push through. Now, President Herzog has actually been at the forefront of efforts to try and mediate some sort of compromise negotiation between Benjamin Netanyahu's government and the opposition parties, hosting negotiation talks at the president's residence over the past few months. But those seemingly fell apart, and the government has been pushing forward once again with parts of this legislation. And that's why we're seeing these protests really ramping up over the past week or so across Israel. Now, the day before Herzog landed, President Biden did have a phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, but there is a question about whether there was actually an invitation to the White House or to the United States or not. Now, the Israeli readout of that phone call did say that President Biden invited Prime Minister Netanyahu to the United States for a visit, but the White House readout didn't go so far. We have is the White House using essentially saying that they agreed to meet. That's according to National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, not mentioning the word invitation, not mentioning the word White House. Now, there is some predictions potentially that what that could mean is that the two will meet sometime in the United States, but not necessarily a big Oval Office White House meeting. Most likely that could possibly be a meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly that is set to take place in September.
Like the Advocate channel on Facebook for the best way to get updates on stories that advocate for equality, justice, our rights, and more. AC 24/7 continues with today's top 2 pick.
The U.S. Army says Private Travis King is the soldier who on Tuesday crossed into North Korea and by the end of the day was the topic of clearly coordinated Washington media briefings.
I'm a U.S. soldier on a private JSA orientation tour crossed willfully and without authorization.
Willfully and without authorization crossed into North Korea.
Willfully and without authorization crossed the military demarcation line. We believe that he is in the BRK custody.
An Army official tells CNN King was going to be administratively separated from the Army after facing disciplinary action for assault. He was escorted to a South Korean airport to go back to the U.S., but when the escort could not go through customs with him, King was able to leave the airport. That's according to a U.S. defense official.
In terms of my concerns, I'm absolutely foremost concerned about the welfare of our troops.
In 2016, American student Otto Warmbier, who had traveled to North Korea for a trip, was accused of stealing a political poster sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. He was released the next year on humanitarian grounds, but died shortly after returning to the U.S. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley says North Korea's leader cannot be trusted.
What I will say to Biden, if you go talk to him, I can tell you what Kim's going to want. He's going to want sanctions lifted. We cannot do it.
I'm Emily Schmidt reporting.
Follow the Advocate channel on Twitter and Instagram to stay updated on stories that matter every day. Here's our number 1 story of the day. Take a look.
It's so hot in parts of the U.S. this week, Nevada's tackling extra road repairs.
When it's over 100 degrees, our street temps can be over 140. It makes the asphalt soft, and big heavy trucks can cause ruts in it.
This Phoenix doctor says his ER is trying to keep up with heat-related illnesses.
We'd probably use about 5 or 6 times that. Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of ice.
And this news camera overheated in Death Valley. In fairness, it's the literal hottest place on Earth, although some might say that about their own backyards today.
It's pretty unbearable unless you're in AC or near water. So I was like, we're going to the water.
Plenty of Americans are escaping their hometowns for summer vacation, but that doesn't mean they can escape the heat. Italy, France, China, and Japan have new temperature records from this week. Wildfires are burning on multiple continents, and Delta says a flight in Las Vegas didn't even make it off the tarmac Monday because at least one passenger was treated for heat-related discomfort. Health experts just suggest going someplace cool.
The most common mistake people make is trying to tough it out.
I'm Amy Kiley reporting.
Thanks for watching the Advocate channel's top stories. We're on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Follow, like, and share, or check out advocatechannel.com for even more stories that advocate for you.